Hi, AJ, Mary. Hi.
Yeah.
I've got this real fear with God that it means sacrifice.
Yeah.
That the sackcloth and the ashes and giving up everything.
A terrible life of
Yeah.
hardship.
Just going door to door with a little bowl
Yeah.
saying, could I have some food? Yep.
Well, I did belong to like a Christian, I don't like to use cult, but it was like a group, and we did have to give up families. I gave up 2 babies.
Wow.
All for the name of trying to find God.
Yep. Yep.
And to me, I was willing to give up everything.
Yep.
But it didn't work out.
No.
It just went to shit.
Yeah, of course.
And so now it still burns inside of me, and your words resonate with me so much.
Yeah.
But I've still got this huge fear that I'm going to end up having to give up everything.
Everything you've got.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No, so, like I often, I can see the emotional injury and where it comes from in terms of the environment that you've lived in. Yeah, perhaps if we can draw some of those, is there a few of those that need to go across?
Is that...
If any of you need to just draw them across, you're fine with the sun.
One other thing, like at night now, I'm waking up with a real panic.
Yep.
It's like it's a real kind of oppression and heart beating and...
Yeah, yeah, because you have some spirits with you too who feel the same way, of course, so that's going to impact upon you. Whenever you have an emotion inside of yourself that you can't completely release, you will actually also have spirits with you who have identical emotions trying to keep you in the same emotion because of their belief systems being the same as yours. So the key is to have a desire to deal with your emotion first, and then those attractions won't happen anymore. Can we describe a bit about God's nature, perhaps? And then that might help you with this emotion that you have. Okay. So God, whom most of us on the planet don't know yet, right? We start, because of what's happening on the world, so here's the earth, because of what's happening on the earth, we look at God through the eyes of what's happening on the earth most of the time. Right? So instead of seeing God as she truly is, we see God in a very distorted fashion. It's like we're looking through layers and layers and layers and layers of mist. We can't really see God's true nature. And ironically, God's true nature is very similar to our pure nature, but far more extended or far better. So, for example, when you have a child, do you want the child to do what you want, or do you want the child to do what it wants? Which one would you prefer? If you're connected to a loving space, just use the mic there.
What the child wants.
You would like the child to do what it wants, wouldn't you? Not what you want.
No.
And in fact, if you think about it, God already has everything. God's created everything. Everything in the universe exists already because of God. None of us actually have anything that hasn't been given to us by God in some way. Does that make sense? So why would God then want you to take away what she's given in order to prove your devotion to her?
It's like, am I worthy?
Well, let's look at you. There's you sitting on the earth. Right? And you're saying, basically, in the past, what you've been saying to God is, you've actually looked at God and you've said, God, you are a demanding God who demands my sacrifice.
In order to prove.
In order to prove to you, I have to prove who I am to you. Now, does that make much sense either? God, who already knows all things, already knows what you are. So how can you prove anything opposite to what God already knows? Right? Yeah. So God already knows if you've got that little bit of evilness in the heart that makes you go towards that direction, and God already knows all the good things you've also done. Already. God already knows those things. God already knows your purity of intention or the impure intention that you had, depending on which one you had in a certain situation or circumstance. God already knows. There's nothing you can hide from her. So when I try to prove to her what I am, can you see I'm attempting to hide what I am, and I also don't understand that God already sees what I am anyway. So I'm already not understanding the true nature of God. So what happens with most religions is they start promoting this on the planet. They start promoting, this is the way to God. This is the way. You've got to be holy, sacrificial, and you've got to see God as a demanding, punishing God that you've got to fear. They say fear in a nice way, many of them. Right? Fear in a nice way. How does that work? But anyway, that's what they say. You have got to have a healthy fear of God. But as a parent, even though you have huge power over your little unborn child or your newly born child, do you want that child to fear you? Surely not. Now, there's many parents on the planet, unfortunately, who do want their children to fear them. We just watched a movie. What was it called? The one that was all black and white, that was set in 19...
Oh, The White Ribbon.
The White Ribbon. Has anybody ever seen that movie?
It's in German.
It's in German. But honestly, the parents in that movie, particularly the fathers, are definitely not the kind of father most of us would want to be. Right?
Well,
but ironically,
when
we think
do,
God is that father.
And why do we think that? Often because we've had
a dad just like it.
Dad or a mum just like it. Who loved us.
In quotations.
But they demanded of us a sacrifice to prove that we loved them. So then we go, oh, that's love. And God's loving, so God must be like that.
Does that make sense? Yeah. Now, that is not what God is. That is my perception of God based on the injuries that I've obtained through my environment. Nothing like what God actually is. And in fact, when you start to actually feel what God is the total and complete opposite of that. And yet we don't believe that. Now, unfortunately, because these parents have demanded this sacrificing love from us, which is actually not love at all, but rather meeting their addictions, we then created religions to mirror the same role as our parents demanded. In other words, we now create a religion, right, that demands a sacrifice from us to prove our worthiness to God, our parent, in this case. Can you see? It's like, how distorted is that? Right? The truth is, God is nothing like this, and nothing like these unloving parents that have demanded this sacrifice to prove, nothing like them either, in fact, totally the opposite. But because I believe that the God must be like that, I'll do one of two things. I'll either enter a religion that does this and feel that it's actually a good religion initially. Does that make sense? Because it reminds me so much of the kind of system that my parents brought me up under. But secondly, the alternative is I reject any religion that does this, completely out of hand. So I reject all religion. Anytime a person says God, all I feel is resentment and anger and hatred and all those emotions. So I usually go in one or two ways. I either rebel against that or I accept it. Now, unfortunately, on the planet, most religions still accept this viewpoint of God. And as a result, they force the acceptance of that viewpoint on their children even, many of whom become rebellious against that viewpoint, of course, and then go the opposite direction, where there is no God, there's only science and so forth. And so we have a complete distortion of the reality. And the reality is that God is nothing like this picture presents.
Because this is what you're saying in the beginning, isn't it, babe? That this is all the world's viewpoint. Like, if you like, this whole big thing here is all what we see God through, this big lens. And in the end, none of us end up seeing God. We just see either God wants demand and sacrifice, and that's God, but that's not really God. Or I hate God because God demands sacrifice. And so we miss God in the whole, there's a big cut-off. And nobody actually ever gets to understand the real nature of God, which is abundant and desirous for you to have your desires. So in harmony with love. Yeah.
So in reality, most people pass into the spirit world with no concept of God that's real. All of their concepts of God are highly distorted through these other relationships and through their relationship with religion. And as a result of that, many pass and then really, really struggle because they feel that religion taught them to have this viewpoint of God that's not real anymore. They arrive in the first sphere in a lot of pain, and they wonder why they aren't all of a sudden in heaven with Jesus, you know, and all those kind of things. And the reason why is because all of this was totally unloving, and we accepted it as love when it's nothing to do with love at all. In fact, the very premise of my death, which is a question that will come up in a second, is all based on these unloving principles. So perhaps we go straight to that question.